70 years of life and a betrayal I never imagined I would face. My own son, the child I carried and raised, looked me straight in the eye and lied. That pain still burns quietly inside me, as if it all happened just yesterday. But the reckoning came in a way no one could have expected. I want to share with you the story that completely changed my life and the way I see family. My name is Allison Miller. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, a place where the sun always shines and people seem just as warm. I worked as a librarian for 35 years at the Central Bank's Research Library downtown. Between shelves filled with stories, I built my life raising my only son and sharing 40 years of marriage with my husband, Leonard. May he rest in peace. My family used to be admired by everyone, or at least, that's what it looked like. That day began like any other. The calendar marked May 12th, my 70th birthday. I woke up early, as usual. Age might change, but habits don't. I straightened the bed with the cotton sheets my dear friend Margaret had given me, brewed a strong cup of black coffee, and sat out on the porch of the small apartment where I'd lived for more than 40 years. From there, I could see the Ashley River winding around the city. That view always calmed me, even on stormy days. Leonard had been gone 8 years now, taken by a heart attack in his sleep. Since then, I'd lived alone in the apartment full of memories. My son, Julian, married Patricia 15 years ago. They lived in an upscale neighborhood in Mount Pleasant. He was the branch manager of a large bank, always busy, always in meetings, and because of his important work, he only visited his aging mother once a month. Patricia came by even less, and her mother, Edith, who owned a chain of beauty stores, always looked at me as though I were an antique that belonged in a museum rather than in her son-in-law's life. After breakfast, I sat staring at the old photos on the shelf. Leonard smiling wide, holding a tiny Julian on Myrtle Beach. The three of us celebrating Julian's 15th birthday, his graduation, his wedding with Patricia. Frozen moments of a family that now only existed in the past. I decided I wouldn't sit home crying on my birthday anymore. That evening, I would put on my best clothes, take a deep breath, and step out into the night as a woman who still deserved to be celebrated. All day, a quiet uneasiness kept echoing inside me, a sharp instinct only a mother would recognize when something is wrong. Julian was the child we waited 5 years for, a boy born from love and hope. As I sipped my coffee, my eyes rested on the framed photos in the living room. One picture always moved me deeply: Julian at 6 years old, sitting on his father's shoulders, both smiling as if the world belonged to them. Leonard used to put all his dreams into that boy. "Our son will make it big, Allison," he'd say proudly. And he did, graduated in economics, studied abroad, landed a great job at the bank, but somewhere along the way, things changed. Maybe it started when he met Patricia, the only daughter of Edith, who owned a beauty chain across the city's malls. Patricia was beautiful and polite, but there was always that subtle air of superiority that made me uneasy. Or maybe it began even earlier, after Leonard passed, when Julian had to shoulder more responsibility. I never knew for sure. I only knew that, with time, his visits became fewer, his calls shorter, and his excuses more frequent. "Mom, I'm swamped. Patricia's not feeling well. We're meeting her parents later." I used to stay silent, convincing myself it was normal that my son had his own life now, and I shouldn't be selfish. But that day, something inside me changed. Turning 70 felt monumental. I thought about every birthday I'd ever had from childhood until that moment. I remembered my parents' parties, the homemade cakes, the candles I blew out while wishing for health and love. I remembered birthdays with Leonard, his surprises, his small but heartfelt gifts. And then I thought about recent years, when the celebrations had grown hollow, just a few obligatory calls and, if I was lucky, a rushed visit the following weekend. But this year, I didn't want that. I deserved more. I deserved to celebrate 70 years of my life fully. I picked up the phone and called Julian. He answered after a few rings, his usual hurried tone. "Hi, Mom." "Good morning, son. Just calling to remind you it's my birthday today." "I know, Mom. I was going to call later. Happy birthday." "Thank you. I thought maybe tonight we could have dinner together. It's been a while since we talked properly." I heard hesitation, that familiar pause that always came before a lie. "Mom, tonight's tough. I've got an important client meeting in New York. It'll go late. You understand, right? I can't cancel." My throat tightened. I swallowed the mix of disappointment and bitterness. "Of course I understand. Work comes first. How about lunch this weekend? I'll bring a cake and we'll celebrate properly." "All right, Julian." I hung up, my heart hollow. I looked at the photo on the wall, Leonard's portrait beside the vase of fresh flowers I replaced every Wednesday from the local market. "What would you do, Leonard?" I whispered, as if he could hear me. I walked into my bedroom and opened the closet. There it was, the navy dress Leonard loved. "That dress was made for you," he used to say. "It brings out your eyes." I ran my hand along the soft fabric, remembering the last time I'd worn it, Amanda's 15th birthday party. It fit a bit tighter now at the waist. Time spares no one. But I decided to wear it again. I took out the pearl earrings Leonard had given me for our 40th anniversary, not long before he passed. "For the most precious woman in my life," he had said, handing me the little blue velvet box. I still remembered the way he looked at me that night. I showered, fixed my hair, and applied light makeup. In the mirror stood a 70-year-old woman, but with light still in her eyes, still wanting to smile, still wanting to live. My son's indifference couldn't take that away. I grabbed the purse Amanda had given me last Christmas, saying I needed something more modern, and left home. At the front desk, Richard, the doorman who'd known me for decades, looked surprised to see me dressed up. "Mrs. Allison, heading to a party?" "Out for a birthday dinner," I smiled. 70 today." "Really? Happy birthday." "You look wonderful." I laughed at his kind words. The man had always been gentle with me, especially after Leonard's passing. "Your son picking you up?" "No, Richard. He's busy." I caught a flicker in his eyes, maybe pity, maybe quiet anger, but he only nodded and called a taxi. While waiting, I thought about calling Margaret, my lifelong friend. She always told me to go out, have dinner, meet people. "Life isn't over yet," she'd say. But tonight felt different. It was my birthday, and something told me I had to face this night alone. The taxi arrived, and I asked the driver to take me to the Riverside View, the riverside restaurant Leonard and I used to visit on special occasions. It was expensive for a retired librarian, but tonight, I was worth it. As we drove, I watched the city through the window. Charleston had changed so much: new buildings, busier streets, but the river was still there, quietly flowing through the years. I thought about how life is like the river, sometimes calm, sometimes fierce, but always flowing forward. When the taxi stopped, I paid the fare and stepped out carefully. My legs weren't as steady as they used to be, and the low heels I had chosen to match my dress didn't help much either. The restaurant's entrance was grand, with marble stairs and beautifully carved wooden doors. I remembered the first time Leonard and I came here, back when he got his promotion. We had been nervous, feeling like we didn't quite belong in such a fancy place. Michael, the waiter who had worked there for years, recognized me immediately. He approached with his warm smile. "Mrs. Allison, It's been so long. Are we celebrating something special tonight? Yes, it's my birthday today. That's wonderful. Will Mr. Julian be joining you? A sharp pain pricked my chest. Everyone always assumed I couldn't possibly come alone, that of course my son would be there. How could I explain that he had more important things to do? No, Michael. I'm here by myself tonight. 70 years that deserves to be celebrated, don't you think? He nodded politely and said no more, then led me through the tables. My heart stopped. There, by the window overlooking the river, was Julian. Not in a meeting like he'd said. Sitting with Patricia and her mother Edith, laughing, raising champagne glasses. Time seemed to freeze. My whole body went stiff, my breath caught in my throat. Michael noticed something was wrong and looked at me with concern. "Mrs. Allison, are you all right?" I didn't answer right away. My eyes were fixed on the scene like it was a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My son had lied to his 70-year-old mother on her birthday. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. "I'm fine. Please get me a quiet table in the corner." He nodded and guided me to a far spot where I could see them without being seen. I thanked him and ordered a glass of white wine to calm the trembling in my hands. When the drink arrived, I still couldn't take my eyes off their table. They looked so happy, so at ease. Patricia wore an expensive dress, glittering with jewelry. Edith, hair dyed, makeup flawless, laughed freely, full of confidence. And Julian, my son, smiled as though he carried no burden in the world, as though he hadn't lied to his mother. I realized they were celebrating something. On the table were small gift boxes wrapped in colored paper. Was it a birthday, a promotion, or just another family dinner? Whatever the reason, it was clearly more important than spending a few hours with his mother on her 70th birthday. I took a large sip of wine, feeling the cool liquid slide down my throat. I was never much of a drinker, but right then, I needed it to dull the pain swelling inside me. It was a different kind of pain, not physical, not like losing my husband, but the kind that comes from betrayal. I looked at them, and memories flooded back the sleepless nights when Julian was sick, the extra shifts I took at the library to pay for his private school, the extra tutoring so he could learn English. Leonard and I never had much, but we gave everything we had to that boy, our pride, our hope, our future. And now, there he was, smiling at the woman who had always looked down on me, the same woman who had planned their entire wedding without letting me be anything more than a guest. Edith, who loved to remind me that her daughter had elevated Julian's life with her connections. The images flashed before my eyes every time I had been dismissed, overlooked, hurt, yet still forced a polite smile. How many times had I swallowed my tears to avoid being the annoying old lady they already thought I was? How many times had I justified their coldness to myself? When the waiter returned to take my order, I stared at the menu without reading a word. I picked something at random. I wasn't hungry. My stomach had tightened with humiliation. Then, a thought slowly began to form, one I had never dared before. Something that would make Julian realize I was not the weak, gullible woman he believed me to be. When Leonard passed away 8 years ago, he had left everything carefully arranged. He was always the cautious one, always planning ahead. We had savings, some investments, a paid-off apartment, and a solid life insurance policy. Since Julian was our only child, Leonard had listed his name on many of the accounts and investment portfolios, thinking it would be easier for him to manage when I was gone. But there was one thing my son didn't know, and it was the most important detail of all. I was still the primary holder of every account, with full legal control. Julian only managed them. He made investment decisions and believed everything was practically his. but I had never officially transferred ownership. Something deep down had always told me to wait to keep that authority a little longer, as if a quiet voice whispered that one day I would need it. And perhaps that day had come. I took my phone out of my purse and stared at the screen for a moment. What I was about to do would forever change the relationship between my son and me. It was a step I could never undo. But sitting there alone in an expensive restaurant on my 70th birthday, watching the son I had raised celebrate joyfully after lying to me, I no longer cared about the consequences. My fingers trembled slightly on the screen. I was about to make a decision that would change everything. I looked up again toward their table. Michael walked over with a bottle of wine, pouring it for Julian with the respectful tone the restaurant reserved for wealthy regulars. My son had always known how to charm people, how to make others like him. He inherited that from Leonard. That night, the Riverside View was packed, elegant couples, business people in quiet meetings, families celebrating milestones. The soft lighting reflected off the vases of fresh flowers, and the sound of a live piano made the atmosphere refined and graceful. Through the large glass windows, the river shimmered under the city lights, a view that had moved me countless times before. While waiting for my food, I kept watching their table. Then I noticed something that made my heart sink. In the center of the table was a small birthday cake. I squinted to see clearly, and then it hit me it was a birthday celebration. Not for anyone else, but for Patricia. On the cake, Julian was lighting candles shaped into the number 45. A bolt of realization struck me. So it wasn't just a lie my son had chosen to celebrate his wife's birthday instead of mine. It had never been a problem before when our birthdays fell close together. We used to celebrate on the weekend, both days honored. But this year, he decided hers was worth prioritizing, while mine could be forgotten. Heat rushed to my face, a mix of shame and anger as I watched them, feeling like an outsider peering into my own family's life. Not out of jealousy, nor a craving for attention, but out of the deep sting of being disrespected, ignored by the very person who owed me his life. The waiter brought my entree pan-seared fish with passion fruit sauce, my usual favorite. I nodded in thanks but couldn't stop watching them. Now they were softly singing Happy Birthday, and Patricia was glowing in the candlelight. Julian held her hand, looking at her with a tenderness I hadn't seen directed at me in years. A memory washed over me, Julian, at 6 or 7 years old. I'd been bedridden with the flu for days, but I still dragged myself up to bake him a cake for his birthday. Leonard was away on a business trip, and I didn't want my boy to feel forgotten. I remembered the sweat dripping as I mixed the batter, my hands trembling as I spread the frosting over the uneven layers. And I still remembered the look on Julian's face when he saw it. "This is the best cake in the world, Mom," he'd said, hugging my legs with joy. Where had that little boy gone? When had he become a man capable of lying to his mother on her birthday? I forced myself to take a few bites just to appear composed, but the meal, usually so delicious, tasted empty. I took another sip of wine. The bitterness spread not from the drink, but from within me. At their table, I saw Edith hand Patricia a small box it looked like jewelry. Patricia opened it, gasped, then covered her mouth before hugging her mother tightly. Then it was Julian's turn. He pulled out a larger box from his suit pocket. Patricia opened it carefully, her eyes lighting up. I couldn't see the gift clearly, but her reaction said it all. It was something special. I suddenly thought about the gifts I'd received over the years. A scarf last year, given with the words, "So you won't get cold," as if I were some fragile old woman. The year before that, a digital photo frame I never learned to use. Before that, a basket of tea. Thoughtless gifts, cold, obligatory gestures meant to check a box. Lost in thought, I almost didn't notice what happened next. Amanda, my granddaughter, appeared. She must have been in the restroom when I arrived. She ran to the table, hugged her mother, handed her a small wrapped gift, then started recording Patricia's reaction on her phone. Amanda was the only one in that family who truly loved me. She often visited, telling me about school, her friends, her dream of becoming a doctor. She was the one who taught me to use my new phone, who showed me how to make video calls and send messages. "You have to keep up with the times, Grandma," she'd say, half teasing, half affectionate. Seeing her there so lovely in her blue dress, reminding me of my own mother when she was young, made my heart ache. I knew what I was about to do would affect her, but I also remembered that Leonard had created an educational trust for Amanda the day she was born. Julian couldn't touch that money. My granddaughter would be safe. I kept watching that picture-perfect family that no longer included me. Edith chatted animatedly. Patricia beamed as she showed off a new bracelet, probably Julian's gift. Amanda laughed, holding up her phone. And Julian, my only son, looked at them with pride, that same look he hadn't directed my way in years. In that moment, I finally understood where I stood in his heart. I was just an obligation, someone he visited, out of duty, not love. Someone he could erase with a simple lie, even on the most meaningful day of all. I drained my glass and asked for the check. I couldn't sit there another minute. The waiter looked puzzled when he saw my untouched plate. "Didn't you like your meal, ma'am? I can bring you something else." "No, Michael, everything's fine. I'm just not hungry anymore." He glanced toward Julian's table, and a flicker of understanding crossed his face. "Tonight's meal is on the house, Mrs. Allison, and happy birthday." That unexpected kindness almost made me cry. I smiled, thanked him, and stood. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't walk out as a wounded, pitiful woman. I would face them with dignity, with calm, even if my aging legs ached with every step. I walked straight through the dining hall. Julian saw me first, his eyes widened, his face shifting from surprise to discomfort. Patricia turned pale. Edith frowned, clearly irritated by my presence. Only Amanda smiled brightly. "Grandma, what a surprise! You're here too? Why didn't you tell us?" That sweet, innocent voice cut straight through me. She didn't know. She had no idea her father had lied, had deliberately excluded me from this dinner. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. "I came to celebrate my birthday. 70 years old today." Her eyes widened in shock, then she turned to her father, waiting for an explanation. Julian's mouth opened, his face flushed red, but no words came out. "Mom, It's all right, son," I interrupted, my voice eerily calm. "I understand. Patricia's birthday is obviously more important. After all, 45 is such a more meaningful number than 70, isn't it?" The table fell silent. Patricia looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Edith's mouth opened, but for the first time since I'd met her, she was speechless. Amanda looked around, her face slowly showing confusion as she pieced it together. "I just came by to wish my daughter-in-law a happy birthday," I said, keeping my tone steady though my throat burned. "And to give you a gift, Julian." He looked confused. I took my phone from my purse and placed it on the table, the banking app open on the screen. I just made a transfer. "All the money from our joint accounts has been moved into one you don't know about. Your cards are blocked, and your authorization's canceled. Consider it my birthday gift to myself, freedom from your lies." Julian's expression changed from confusion to disbelief to sheer panic. My son had always treated money as the ultimate power. Maybe that was why he got along so well with Edith and her family. "Mom, you can't do this," he shouted, his voice rising. "That money belongs to us. It's meant to take care of you when you get older." "Then you should know," I answered calmly. "That day might never come. I'm 70 years old and perfectly capable of taking care of myself and managing my finances. Your father was wise enough to keep everything under my name, don't you think?" Edith regained her composure, her usual commanding expression returning. "Allison, your actions are highly irresponsible. You can't just make such a major financial decision based on emotion." "I can," I replied sharply, "and I already did. And I don't recall asking for your opinion on how to manage my family's money." I saw Amanda cover her mouth, trying to hide a small smile. Patricia stayed silent, her face showing clear embarrassment. Julian, however, had completely lost control. "How much?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "How much did you transfer?" "All of it," I said plainly. "Every dollar from our joint accounts, every investment you managed, even your father's life insurance policy, all of it, except for Amanda's education fund." This time it was Patricia who reacted. Her face turned pale as she turned toward her husband. "What? You said those investments were practically ours. You said we'd use that money to buy a new house." So that was it. They had planned to use the lifetime savings Leonard and I worked for to buy themselves a home without even asking me. A cold calm spread through me, but there was no hesitation anymore. "I'm sorry to disappoint you both," I said firmly, "but that money still belongs to me, and it will stay that way until I decide otherwise." Julian's face flushed red, the veins in his forehead bulging just like Leonard's when he was angry. "Mom, please, let's talk about this at home. You're overreacting. This was just a misunderstanding about dinner." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, feeling anger rise inside me. "You looked me in the eyes and lied. You said you had a meeting when you were actually here celebrating your wife's birthday. You deliberately excluded your mother on her 70th birthday. That's not a misunderstanding, Julian. That's a choice." Tears welled in my eyes, not out of weakness, but because I wanted him to see how deeply he had hurt me. What breaks my heart isn't being left out, it's that you didn't have the courage to tell me the truth. If you had simply said, "Mom, it's Patricia's birthday, and I want to have dinner with my family," I would have understood. I would have respected that. But you chose to lie, as if I were too foolish to handle the truth. The table went silent. Even Edith's usual confidence faltered. Amanda quietly wiped her tears. Patricia stared down at her hands, perhaps beginning to realize her share of the blame. Julian looked utterly lost, like a child caught in a lie with no idea what to do. "I won't trouble you any longer," I said, wrapping my shawl around my shoulders. "Amanda, sweetheart, come visit me when you have time. My home is always open for you." I turned to leave. Then a small hand grabbed my arm. It was Amanda. "Grandma, I didn't know. Dad said you had other plans today." "It's all right, dear," I said softly. "This is between your father and me." She hugged me tightly, right there in the middle of the crowded restaurant, not caring who was watching. I caught the familiar scent of her perfume, the one I'd given her for her 13th birthday. I hugged her back, realizing that no matter what I had lost tonight, at least my granddaughter's love remained. I left the restaurant with my head held high, my heart filled with a mix of bitterness and relief. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. That night, on my 70th birthday, I reclaimed something I hadn't even realized. I'd lost: my power, my dignity, and my voice. The night air was cool as I stepped out of the riverside view. I took a deep breath, feeling the breeze off the river. The city lights shimmered across the water, golden and trembling. I stood there for a while, looking at the river that had witnessed nearly my entire life. I didn't call a taxi right away. I needed to walk, to let my thoughts settle. I followed the riverside path, my footsteps echoing in the quiet night. The old trees cast long shadows under the streetlights. Inside me was a swirl of emotions, a touch of regret when I remembered the stunned look on Julian's face, but deep down, a strange sense of satisfaction. Now he would finally understand what it felt like to be dismissed, to be treated like a shadow in someone else's life. I stopped at a small square, sat on a worn wooden bench, and gazed at the illuminated bridge and the still boats anchored on the water. I took out my phone. The screen still displayed the confirmation of the transfer. In truth, I hadn't transferred everything, just enough to scare him to make him understand I was serious. The rest remained in our joint account, but I had temporarily frozen his access. In just a few hours, when he tried to withdraw or swipe his card, he would understand. What Julian didn't know, what I had never told anyone, was that for the past 5 years, I'd been studying finance on my own. It started when I found a book at the library before I retired, called Finance for Independent Women. At first, it was just curiosity, but those pages awakened a fierce desire to learn. From then on, I read everything I could: books, magazines, online articles Amanda helped me find. I took free courses offered by the bank and watched countless instructional videos. Over time, I learned about investments, interest rates, and how to grow money wisely. When Leonard was alive, he had always managed our finances. After he passed, Julian simply assumed that role. No one ever thought I could do it myself. They all saw me as a clueless widow who knew nothing about money. But they were wrong. I knew, and I knew very well. Quietly, I had opened accounts that Julian knew nothing about. I started with small, safe investments. I learned to use financial apps and online platforms, keeping everything discreet. Even Margaret, my closest friend, never knew. While I learned, I observed how Julian handled the money Leonard had left. Most of the time, his decisions were reasonable, but occasionally, I noticed choices that benefited him and his family more than they did me. Small expenses here and there, but together, they formed a troubling pattern. Like when he used money to renovate the vacation home in Florida he called the family property, though I rarely went there. Or when he invested a large amount in a company owned by Patricia's friend, or that luxury car he bought, justifying it as maintaining a successful image for his bank clients. I never said a word. I let him think I didn't understand, that I trusted him completely. And for a while, I trusted my son. Until tonight. Now, sitting on that park bench, watching the river flow silently under the lights, I knew I had a new plan. One far beyond the shock I had delivered at the restaurant. I knew my son, his ambition, his pride, and his dependence on appearances. I reopened my phone and logged into the investment platform Julian probably never suspected I could access. Portfolios, funds, high-risk stocks with high returns. I began making strategic adjustments, reallocating assets, changing ratios, reshaping the portfolio. I wasn't acting out of anger. Every step I took was carefully calculated, based on the knowledge I'd built over the years. I didn't want to destroy my son. I wanted to teach him a lesson about respect, about consequences, and about the value of what truly matters in life. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying the scent of rain from afar. Charleston weather could change quickly on nights like this. I put my phone away, stood up, feeling the ache in my legs after a long day, and walked toward the main street to call a taxi. The driver, about my age, chatted about the weather, traffic, and how the city had changed. I responded briefly, my mind still turning over my new plan. When I arrived at my building, Richard, the doorman, was still on duty. He looked at me curiously, probably expecting I'd return with my son, or at least in a better mood. "Good evening, Mrs. Allison. Did you have a nice dinner?" "It was interesting," I said softly, full of surprises. He nodded, not asking more, something I'd always appreciated about him. He knew when to stay silent. I chose the stairs over the elevator, as I always did when I needed to think clearly. Each step felt like a small victory. When I opened a door to my apartment, the familiar quiet wrapped around me again. I turned on the lights and looked around. The walls still held old photographs, the furniture Leonard and I had chosen together decades ago, the neatly stacked books in every corner, a librarian's habit that never fades. I went into the bedroom, slipped off the shoes that had been hurting my feet, took off the navy blue dress, and put on a soft robe. After washing my face and removing my makeup, I saw in the mirror a 70-year-old woman with eyes shining with determination and strength I hadn't felt in years. I returned to the living room, went to the bookshelf, moved a few volumes aside, and took out the carved wooden box Leonard had given me for our 20th wedding anniversary. Inside were important documents, property papers, insurance policies, and most importantly, Leonard's will. I sat at the dining table, carefully unfolding each sheet, reviewing every clause, making notes. Leonard had always been meticulous, especially with finances and legal matters. The will stated clearly, I was the sole heir, with full authority over all assets. Julian would inherit only after my death, but under one specific condition: only if he showed genuine care and respect for his mother throughout her lifetime. Leonard had understood me better than anyone. He knew I would never disinherit our son, but he wanted to make sure I was treated with the respect I deserved. Back then, I thought that clause was unnecessary. Now, I realized it was almost prophetic. I put the papers back and went to the window. Rain had begun to fall soft at first, then turning into a white curtain. Streetlights glowed against the wet pavement. I stood there, watching people hurry to find shelter, cars slowing down under the downpour. My phone rang. It was Julian. I let it ring. Once, twice, a third time. Then came the messages. "Mom, we need to talk. Please pick up. What have you done? Why did you do this? I'm coming over." I smiled faintly. Of course he would come, not out of concern for me, but for the money. I began preparing for what would come next. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, straightened the room, and sat in Leonard's worn brown leather armchair, the one that still felt warm, still felt safe. The doorbell rang exactly 23 minutes later. Julian was always punctual, especially when it came to his interests. I opened the door. He stood there soaked from the rain, tie loosened, his suit jacket dripping. The confident face I'd known all his life was twisted with worry and anger. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Mom, have you lost your mind? Why did you do this? Do you have any idea what you've caused? I have bills, contracts, investments pending. Patricia's in shock. Amanda's been crying all night. I had to leave the party because of this madness." I closed the door quietly and said, "Hello, Julian. Sit down, have some tea, and let's talk like adults." My calm tone threw him off. He had probably expected to find a guilty, frail old woman ready to apologize. Instead, he was facing someone composed and unshakable. "You think I came here for tea?" He snapped. "I want you to undo everything right now. Reopen the accounts, move the money back, restore my cards. Sit down, Julian. My voice was sharp and firm, like when he was a child. Surprisingly, he obeyed, dropping onto the sofa. I poured the tea, set a cup in front of him, and sat back down. "What you did today is unforgivable," I began. "You didn't just lie. You deliberately excluded your mother from a family celebration on her own birthday. Mom, it was just a misunderstanding. We planned to celebrate your birthday this weekend. Tonight was only for Patricia. Something more intimate. Intimate enough to include your mother-in-law, but not your mother?" He went silent. I looked straight into his eyes. "You need to understand what your father left behind wasn't just numbers in a bank account. It was sweat, sacrifice, and dreams. Most of it was meant for you to give you the opportunities we never had." I took a sip of tea before continuing. "Do you remember when you were 17 and wanted to study abroad? Where do you think that money came from? Your father sold the piece of land he loved most, the one he said would be our retirement home. He gave up that dream just so you could have a chance at yours." Julian looked down, silent. "And when you wanted to study further in California, I went back to work full-time, and your father took on night tutoring just so you could have a comfortable education. I know, Mom. I've always been grateful." "No, Julian. Gratitude isn't just words. It's reflected in how you treat people, in your choices, in your respect. And today, you did the opposite." I stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out an old leather photo album. Sitting beside him, I opened it carefully. "Look here, your 6th birthday. I was terribly sick, but I still made you a strawberry chocolate cake, just the way you liked it." I turned another page. "Here's the day you graduated from high school. Your father left work early just to be there. He almost missed an important meeting, but he said nothing was more important than that moment." As I spoke, Julian fell silent. The anger on his face slowly gave way to reflection. "Family," I said softly, "isn't just about sharing blood or a last name. It's about putting one another first, showing respect, remembering where you come from and who stood by you when life got hard." I closed the album and placed it on the table. "As for the money, don't worry. I'm not planning to leave you with nothing, but from now on, things will be different. I'm fully capable of managing my own finances, just as I've quietly done for years." Julian's face froze, disbelief written all over it. I smiled. "That's right, Julian. Your mother, the woman you thought was weak and old, has learned about investments, finance, and the market. And I've been watching every step you made with that money. I had to admit, most of Julian's decisions had been sound, but some had made me question his judgment." I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and handed it to him. "Look, these are statements from accounts you didn't even know existed. I've managed them myself for the past 5 years. And here are the profits I've earned. Compare them to what you've done in the same period." Julian stared at the screen, stunned. His eyes followed the numbers, charts, and growth percentages. His expression shifted from shock to something resembling new respect. "How did you learn all this?" he asked quietly. "The same way I've learned everything else in life, my son. By studying, observing, and practicing. Growing old doesn't mean becoming helpless. It means having experience, perspective, and most importantly, knowing when to act." I took my phone back and slipped it into my robe pocket. "Starting tomorrow, I'll restore part of your access. You'll be able to use your card and make limited transactions, but the main control stays with me. Every month, we'll review the spending together." Julian's voice rose. "You're treating me like a child." "No, Julian," I said firmly. I'm treating you like an adult who needs to relearn what respect and honesty mean. If you want to regain my trust, you'll have to prove it through actions, not words." Rain kept pounding against the window, the thunder rolling closer. A flash of lightning illuminated the room with pale blue light. "What about the new house?" he asked, still bitter. Patricia already picked out the furniture. I shook my head, disappointed that his mind was still on material things. "The house can wait. Right now there are more important things that need rebuilding." He looked down at his teacup, his face full of confusion. In that moment, I no longer saw a grown man, but the little boy who once ran to me, proudly showing a crayon drawing from school, waiting for my approval. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said softly. "And I don't know if I can forgive you either," I answered honestly. "But this isn't about forgiveness right now. It's about starting over, about learning how to rebuild a family. That takes time." I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "It's late. You should go home. Talk to Patricia. Explain things to her. We'll talk again tomorrow." He rose slowly, still uncertain, and paused at the door. "Happy birthday, Mom." The words came late, but they were a beginning. "Thank you, son," I replied. After he left, I returned to the window, watching the rain fall. The so-called revenge I had carried out was never really about the money, even though I've been the tool that forced Julian to face his mistakes. My true purpose was to reclaim my place in this world, to reclaim my voice, my independence. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, knowing I had taken back control of my life. The next morning, the sky was unusually clear, as if the storm had washed away not only Charleston's streets, but also my own spirit. I woke early, as I had for 70 years, brewed a strong cup of black coffee with no sugar, and carried it to the balcony. The city was waking up, people rushing to work, shop doors opening, sunlight glinting off the Ashley River. I inhaled deeply, breathing in the cool, damp scent of morning. Though the night before had been turbulent, my heart felt calm. Around 7:30, my phone rang. It was Margaret, my longtime friend, calling with a belated birthday wish. "Allison, forgive me. I spent all day at the hospital with my granddaughter. She broke her arm at school. I didn't get home until late, and I fell right asleep." "Don't worry, Margaret. How's the little one doing?" "She's fine, thankfully. Nothing serious. But tell me, how was your birthday? Did Julian do anything special?" I hesitated. Even though Margaret was the person I trusted most, I found it hard to talk about the night before. "Different from what I expected," I said briefly. "I'll tell you tomorrow when we meet." "That doesn't sound good. Want me to stop by? We can have coffee, talk a bit." "No need, Margaret. I have a few things to handle, but let's have lunch tomorrow at the Central Market like we used to." After hanging up, I finished my coffee and got ready to go out. I chose a navy blue dress, a crisp white cotton blouse, and the simple pearl necklace Leonard had given me for our 10th anniversary. I brushed my silver hair neatly, used a little hairspray to keep it in place, and applied a touch of lipstick and powder. In the mirror, I saw a 70-year-old woman who looked composed, confident, and dignified. The building where I used to work, the Central Bank branch downtown, was only about a 15-minute walk from my apartment. I decided to walk, enjoying the fresh morning air. Along the way, I greeted a few neighbors, exchanged a few words with the flower vendor at the corner, and waved to the security guard outside the office building I passed every day. When the bank came into view, its sleek glass architecture gleaming in the sunlight, memories came rushing back. This was where I met Leonard, where I'd worked my whole life, where I'd made lifelong friends. I stepped inside and approached the reception desk. "Good morning. I'd like to see Mr. August Reynolds." The young receptionist looked up, surprised. "Mr. Reynolds is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but please tell him Allison Miller is here. He'll understand." She hesitated but picked up the phone. Seconds later, her eyes widened. "Mr. Reynolds says to please wait a moment. He'll be right out." I smiled. August and I had worked together for over 20 years. I had trained him when he was still a clumsy intern how to research documents, how to organize case files. Now he was the bank's chief financial officer, still the kind, dependable man I remembered. In less than 5 minutes, August appeared tall, gray-streaked, but still striking. "Allison, what a surprise!" "Why didn't you call first?" He hugged me warmly. "It was a last-minute decision. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Interrupting? Never. I'll always make time for you. Come to my office." We walked down the familiar hallway, passing the library where I used to work. A few older employees recognized me and smiled. His office on the 10th floor was spacious, with windows overlooking the city center. The walls were lined with certificates, family photos, and one framed picture I recognized immediately taken at my retirement farewell party. "Coffee? Or something stronger?" he joked. "Coffee's just fine, thank you." I sat down in the comfortable chair across from his desk. "So, Mrs. Allison, to what do I owe the honor of this visit? Yesterday was your birthday, right? 70? Your memory is as sharp as ever, August." "That's right. And it's because of that birthday that I'm here." I told him everything the lie Julian told me, the dinner at the restaurant, and the decision I made that night with the accounts. August listened intently without interrupting. "Now I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I wanted to teach him a lesson about family and respect, but I don't want to ruin his career or destroy our relationship." He was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. When his assistant brought coffee, he waited until she left before speaking. "Allison, you've always been one of the most rational and strong-willed people I've ever met. But few realize there's a fire inside you that's just as powerful." I smiled faintly. "What your son did was wrong, no question about that. But the real question is, what do you want?" I want him to understand, August, to feel what it's like to be dismissed, to be excluded from what truly matters, family. I want him to learn to value what can't be bought with money. August nodded. "Then we'll need a smarter approach." For the next 2 hours, we crafted a detailed plan together. With his experience and connections in the banking world, August could help me execute everything legally, transparently, and strategically enough to make Julian reevaluate his actions. He wouldn't have agreed if he knew my full intentions, but I knew it would work. I left the central bank with a folder in my handbag and a renewed sense of purpose. I walked to the office of Robert Hayes, an old friend of Leonard's and our family lawyer. I hadn't made an appointment, but like with August, I knew he would see me. Robert looked older. Then I remembered nearly 80, with slumped shoulders and a weaker voice, but his eyes were still sharp and his mind keen as ever. "Allison, bless your heart. How long has it been?" "It's been a while, Robert. Since Amanda's 15th birthday party last year." "Oh, little Amanda. She must be a lovely young lady now. She's doing great, wants to go into medicine, just as clever as her grandfather." We talked for a while, reminiscing about old friends and days gone by. Then I explained why I was there. Like August, Robert listened carefully without interruption. When he finished reviewing my documents, he nodded, his voice warm and steady. "What you're planning is completely legal and very wise. Leonard would be so proud of how well you've managed things." I left his office with another stack of papers and agreed to return next week to sign the official documents. The plan was in motion. We had lunch at a small restaurant nearby, talking about age, health, and the years that can never return. Robert had lost his wife 3 years earlier, and the quiet sorrow of a man living with memories still lingered in his eyes. "How did you manage, Allison? After Leonard passed, how did you keep living?" The question caught me off guard. I rarely spoke about it. "I don't think moving on is the right phrase, Robert. Leonard is still here in memories, in the habits I've kept, in every decision I make. But I learned that life doesn't stop. The best way to honor the dead is to keep living fully." He nodded and didn't press further. After lunch, he insisted on walking me to the taxi, refusing to let me walk in the summer heat. We said goodbye, promising not to let so many years pass before meeting again. Instead of heading home, I asked the driver to take me to the bank where Julian worked. The building was tall, with a restored classical facade and a modern interior. The bank's name gleamed in gold letters above the main entrance. I stepped up to the reception desk. "I'd like to see Mr. Julian Miller." The elegantly dressed receptionist looked at me politely but with curiosity. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "No, but tell him his mother is here." Her eyes widened. Of course, everyone in the bank knew Julian, the young manager on the fast track to promotion. But few, if any, had ever seen his mother. "Please wait a moment." She made a quick call, then ushered me into a private waiting room. The room was tastefully decorated, with leather chairs, framed paintings, and a small table with coffee, water, and cookies. I sat quietly, watching people in suits pass through the glass hallway. 10 minutes later, Julian walked in, visibly tense. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the exhaustion on his face. "What are you doing here, Mom?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to talk," I said evenly. "And what better place to discuss financial matters than where you work?" He ran a hand through his hair, a habit he'd had since childhood whenever he was nervous. "About last night, I want to apologize. I shouldn't have lied to you. You're right, you shouldn't have. But that's not why I came here." I opened my bag, took out the folder that August and Robert had prepared, and placed it on the desk. "What's this?" Julian asked, his eyes fixed on the stack of papers. "These are the new terms regarding the family assets. I prepared them this morning with some very capable people." He flipped through the pages, his face gradually turning pale. "Are you cutting me out of the inheritance?" "No, Julian. I'm simply restructuring the assets. Around 60% will go into an educational trust in Amanda's name. About 30% I'm keeping for my own living expenses and charitable donations. The remaining 10% will go to you immediately." "Only 10%? You're leaving me 10% of everything Dad built?" "No, my son. I'm giving you 10% of what your father and I built together, and along with it, an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "An opportunity to rebuild our relationship. To prove that you understand the value of family beyond money. If you can do that within 1 year, we'll review everything again." Julian shot up, pacing back and forth, his face shifting from anger to confusion, then slowly softening. "You'd really do all this over one dinner?" "It's not about a dinner, Julian. It's about the years you've been distant, dishonest, dismissive. You've become someone your father and I barely recognize, a man who values status and image over love and loyalty." He stopped and looked at me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes before it disappeared behind the cold expression of a businessman. "I have an important meeting in 5 minutes. Can we talk later?" "Of course. But before I go, there's one more thing." I called Mr. August Reynolds, your bank's chief financial officer, this morning. Julian froze. What did you say to him? We talked for nearly half an hour. He's an old friend of your father's, a kind man. He was surprised to learn yesterday was my 70th birthday and that you, one of his most talented managers, had lied to avoid having dinner with your own mother. Julian's face turned white. You can't. Oh, I can. And do you know what he said? That family values are the foundation of banking culture. That integrity begins at home. Julian sank into his chair, looking smaller somehow. Why would you do this to me? His voice trembled, almost fragile. I stepped closer. Because I love you. I love the child you once were and still believe in the man you can become. But sometimes, love has to be firm. I adjusted my scarf and said gently, all the documents are here. You can take them. To your lawyer. But they're fully legal and already signed. I'm keeping the originals somewhere safe. I turned to leave, then paused. And don't worry about Mr. Reynolds. He's not going to punish you. In fact, he's invited both of us to dinner at his house this Saturday evening. He said he'd like to meet the son of his old friend. I walked out before Julian could say anything, knowing I had planted not only fear in his heart, but also the seed of hope for change. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of errands. I stopped by a few offices, signed more papers, and rearranged my life in ways I never thought I would at 70. By the time I got home, it was already dark. Amanda was sitting on the steps outside the building. When she saw me, she jumped up and ran into my arms. Grandma, where have you been all day? I tried calling, but you didn't answer. I had a few things to take care of, sweetheart. Come inside, I've already made tea. She sat down, looking worried. Grandma, what's going on? Dad came home last night looking awful. He left early this morning, and Mom's been crying nonstop. Nobody will tell me anything. I held her hand young, warm, and full of life. Amanda, sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have consequences. Your father and I are trying to fix things. Is it about money? I heard Mom say something about frozen accounts and the new house. Money is just a symbol, Amanda. What truly matters are respect, love, and honesty, values I hope you'll always hold on to. Her eyes, so much like Leonard's, searched mine. Are you going to be okay? The question caught in my throat. I'll be fine, sweetheart. In fact, I think I'm better than ever. We talked about school, her college plans, and the book we were reading together. When she stood to leave, she hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you. Whatever you did, I think Dad deserved it. I laughed softly at her bluntness. How do you know that? Because I know my dad and because I trust you more than anyone in the world. After she left, I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights reflect on the river, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 days. I didn't know what the future held, whether Julian would accept the new terms, whether our relationship could ever heal, but I knew one thing for certain. At 70, I had found my voice again. And I would never let anyone take it from me. It took years of being treated as an afterthought in my own son's life to realize something simple. No one gets to decide my worth but me. Something inside me awakened that night on my 70th birthday. A part of me I'd long forgotten. My self-worth, my inner strength, and my ability to stand up and demand the respect I deserve. When I called Julian that morning, I never imagined a simple phone call would lead me here. I never imagined I'd end up sitting alone in a fancy restaurant, watching my son celebrate his wife's birthday after lying to me. And I never thought I'd make such bold decisions, reorganizing not only our family's finances, but our entire relationship as mother and son. I can still picture the look of shock on his face when he saw me walk into that restaurant. I remember the confusion in his eyes when he realized I had taken control of every account. I remember the moment of vulnerability when we met at his office, when he finally understood that the fragile old woman he had dismissed had more strength financially and emotionally than he ever imagined. I have no idea what lies ahead for my family. Maybe Julian will accept the new terms and understand the lesson I'm trying to teach. Maybe he won't. Perhaps, with time, he'll become again the loving, respectful son he once was. I'm not sure whether Patricia will overcome her resentment when the new house slips out of reach, or when their plans are delayed, or whether Edith, my daughter-in-law's mother, who always judged every detail, will ever look at me differently, perhaps with the respect I've longed for. What I do know is that, after many years, I'm finally living on my own terms. I make my own choices, speak my own mind, express my needs, desires, and boundaries, and that, my friends, is worth more than any bank account, luxury dinner, or social reputation. Leonard used to say that life always teaches us the lessons we need, even if it takes a lifetime to understand them. I think I finally understand the lesson he wanted me to learn when he insisted my name remain on the accounts, when he added that clause to his will requiring Julian to show respect. He knew, as he always did, that one day I would need that protection, that tool to keep my place in life. I've thought a lot about what it means to grow old in a society that worships youth, productivity, and instant success. We, the older generation, are often made to feel invisible. Our opinions are ignored, our needs dismissed. We're seen as burdens, as problems to manage instead of people with wisdom, experience, and stories worth sharing. Maybe that's why I decided to tell my story. To prove that even at 70, even when the world says our time has passed, we can still stand tall, still demand respect, still surprise people. And what about you? Have you ever had to choose between love and respect in your own family? And where are you right now as you listen to this story, in your cozy kitchen, on your commute, or in the quiet of your own evening? Share your thoughts and feelings below, because I believe every experience can be a gentle reminder for someone else. If you'd like to continue this journey with me, where we listen, learn, and grow through each story, follow the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful moment. Because sometimes, just one story is enough to warm someone's heart somewhere out there where it's needed most.